Do you ever get a phone call in the middle of a meal? It's an important phone call. You got to take it. And then you come back and you're like, I'm not even hungry anymore. That's a
Yes.
great kind of pattern interrupt to be like, realize, wow, I'm fine.
Yeah.
And it is fascinating when that happens. Something, me and my wife have done a few times, and it sounds ridiculous, but it's like, when you have kids and you're busy, you're so used to just eating quickly so you can feed them and like take care of them, and sometimes on our, date nights or home nights where we just hang in and we order food or make food together, like I'll suggest them like, let's set a timer. Like, let's just really try to just enjoy this because we're so used to eating fast because our kids are there. So like we've done that where we literally put a timer, we set our phone like 20 minutes and it's like the goal is to make this meal last for at least 20 minutes. And you can't do it all the time. Of course we understand, but when you can, it really is it makes the experience so much more enjoyable and you realize you don't need nearly as much food as you think you do. So another tactic is when possible, set a timer, really for 20 minutes. We've all heard it takes at least our, brain and to kind of process, it takes at least 20 minutes to process what we've even eaten. So give yourself the opportunity to feel that.
I remember in college, my college best friend and roommate, she and I used to eat so much that it was like a thing between us. We'd lean back and we'd unbutton the top button, sometimes have to do our zippers on our pants. I'm not even kidding. Don't laugh. I'm laughing. It's okay. But we did this. This was like, oh yeah, this is a button popper. Like that's how we ended our meals. And we heard somebody had this technique. They would get up and like jump up and down to try to move the food down in their belly so they could eat more. I'm not kidding. So listen, everybody's going to eat a lot of food from time to time, and we may all have developed a habit of doing this. So today, Adam, this is what I want to talk about. I want us to help people out. How do we do this? How do we overcome it? Why are we doing it?
Yeah.
Let's start there.
I'm excited to dig into this. So I think it's important to acknowledge that eating a lot of food is comforting. Feeling full is very comforting. I think a lot of us like the feeling of feeling full versus the feeling of uncertainty or the feeling of dealing with everything else that's going on in our lives. In a sense, we're kind of trading all these uncomfortable feelings for a disdain for ourselves. So I think it's important to acknowledge why we're doing it, because ultimately it is comforting.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, you hit right on it. Uncertainty, right? This is what I talk about with clients all the time. I'm like, feeling light and satisfied after eating a meal is a feeling of uncertainty. Am I full? Did I eat enough? Am I going to be hungry in another 20 minutes? Like, there's a whole lot to deal with, right? Like when we're first figuring that piece out. But if I eat to full, like I feel that food in my belly. If I eat to stuffed, no doubt in my mind, I've had plenty to eat. I don't have to think about anything else.
Right. Absolutely. And of course, eventually you'll get to the point where you love how you feel when you feel light and satisfied. And now I really don't like how I feel when I feel full. And we could talk about, kind of the hunger scale, but there is a point where you will get where you ultimately feel way more comfortable feeling light and satisfied.
Right. Absolutely. It's adaptable. Just like we adapted to eating to full and eating to stuffed, right? We got used to that. We can get used to something else. It's just kind of knowing what you're getting into. And I think what's going to be really helpful is for us to talk about how to help ourselves do that, right? Because I have to admit, I don't think anybody out there, meaning like, food companies or restaurants, they're not out to help us achieve this. They're not out to help us eat less. I know everybody's seen those posters, right? Like, here's a hamburger in 1955. Here's a hamburger in 2023, right? Like, nobody's helping us with this. So the onus is on us. And I don't know. That's, well, it is what it is. And right. I think we can help. So what are some tactics that you would recommend to help people learn to eat less?
Yeah, so I think number one is ask yourself, what does feeling full allow you to avoid? right? Ask yourself, what does feeling full allow you to avoid? And really explore it. Because I think when you get to the root of the issue, you realize it's never about the food, right? It's about what the food allows us to avoid. So the more we can bring up what's going on to the surface, the quicker we can deal with it.
Yeah, and that is the key. You got to be ready for it to come to the surface, and then you got to be on your game to start dealing with it. Like, right? Like, it's not just eat less and feel great. Like, eventually, but there's going to be stuff that comes up, right? Because now we're going to kind of pull back a Band-Aid and see what's going on. I think tactically, right? Like I think some people struggle with, well, how do I stop myself from eating so much food? I know myself, like I don't have a lot of great self-control when it comes to how much food I eat off of my plate. So I have to be really thoughtful about it, right? Because I kind of came up in that period of time. I remember hearing like, oh, you better clean your plate. Like, there are starving kids out there and you're not eating all your... I was definitely one of those kids. I cleaned my plate. It didn't matter, right? So I'm still that way, right? And I work pretty hard to kind of apply like our hand plate method that we like to teach our clients of, the half plate of vegetables, palm protein cup, all that. And I can fill a plate. So one tactic that I've used to kind of help myself is to just fill that plate. And then immediately, before I take it to the table, before I sit down and start eating, I cut it in half, I put it in a glass container, and I stick it in the fridge. And so I've set myself up for feeling light and satisfied by the end of that meal, and perhaps having to look at some other feelings besides feeling full or stuffed.
I love that. Something I often joke is like, us finishing our plates, unfortunately and sadly, doesn't feed any starving children. And I think we're so conditioned to that. Like, it's like we have to finish our plate. And that's hard. I don't know if we can ever change that because it's ingrained in us, right? I heard the same thing from my grandparents, everyone. And food that we don't need that we eat is also a form of waste, right? And I think we also think about, what we have to finish, but food we're eating that we don't need is also a form of waste. But anyway, so I love what you're doing. For me, it's really also really dialing into the hunger scale. And really thinking about how I'm feeling, right? The idea is to feel like a 3, satisfied and light, 1, feeling ravenous, 5, feeling stuffed. And the best way to kind of tune into the hunger scale is to eat slowly, to really savor the moment, right? To really savor the flavor, to put your utensils down between bites of food, take sips of water between bites of food. So often we dream about our favorite food all day long, and then when we're actually eating it, we just shovel into our mouths, right? So just really savor the flavor. Pretend you're a food critic. You have to write a review of the taste, the texture, etc. Really just enjoy the experience. So often we're in a rush to get to the next thing. And it's like food is pleasurable no matter what you're eating. So try to enjoy it.
Definitely. I actually gave myself a little dose of practice this morning. So it's funny timing with this video. And I may have shared this before, but I eat like the same exact breakfast every single day. I don't think it's boring. I think it's wonderful. I love it. But because it's the same thing every day, it's very standardized. I kind of know what I'm going to get. And admittedly, a lot of times I'm like doing 10 things while I'm eating my breakfast. All right. So this morning, I just happened to have like a pocket of time. I had accomplished a lot of my morning tasks, and I made my breakfast and I sat down. And I sat down at the table. So no distractions. My son was there for like 2 minutes while he finished his breakfast, and then he was gone. And I sat there and I focused, just like you suggested, on really experiencing the food and tasting what I had put together for myself. And this practice might seem a little out there, but it was so amazing because I had slowed down, sat at the table, and just focused on my meal. I got about a third of the way through my normal plate of food, and I sighed. I literally went, and that is often a cue that we've had enough to eat. And I sat back from the table and I looked at this massive amount of food left on my plate, and I thought, oh my gosh, am I done? And I put the plate on the counter and I walked away. And I just kind of let myself go, what's going on here? Like, have I had enough to eat? Have I not? I had some water. I did a few more things. I came back to my plate a few minutes later, took another bite or two. Nope, I'm all set. I was done. So, listen, this isn't something we all have time and luxury to experience on a regular basis. I mean, I don't know. Most people we work with are pretty darn busy. So, to sit at the table and kind of practice looking for the sigh or finding that 3 on the fullness scale, it takes a lot of intentional decision making to say, I'm going to do this. But it's available and it's really eye opening, I think, when you figure out, like, wow, I might just be consistently eating more than I need to be eating.
Totally. Did you ever get a phone call in the middle of a meal? It's an important phone call. You got to take it. And then you come back and you're like, I'm not even hungry anymore. That's
Yes.
a great kind of pattern to interrupt, to be like, realize, wow, I'm fine.
Yeah.
And it is fascinating when that happens. Something, me and my wife have done a few times, and it sounds ridiculous, but it's like, when you have kids and you're busy, you're so used to just eating quickly so you can feed them and like take care of them, and sometimes on our, date nights or home nights where we just hang in and we order food or make food together, like I'll suggest them, like, let's set a timer. Like, let's just really try to just enjoy this because we're so used to eating fast because our kids are there. So like we've done that where we literally put a timer, we set our phone like 20 minutes, and it's like the goal is to make this meal last for at least 20 minutes. And you can't do it all the time. Of course, we understand. But when you can, it really is just, it makes the experience so much more enjoyable. And you realize you don't need nearly as much food as you think you do. So another tactic is, when possible, set a timer, really for 20 minutes. We've all heard it takes at least our, brain and to kind of process, it takes at least 20 minutes to process what we've even eaten. So give yourself the opportunity to feel that.
Yeah. I've heard there's, a saying out there, it should take you as long to eat a meal as it took for you to prepare it. Which is an interesting thought too. I mean, certainly you could cook a couple of eggs in about 2 minutes.
Right.
I'll take that challenge.
Yeah.
But I think it's a good, kind of good rule of thumb. Like, and I also just like to think, because we're working on portion sizes and we often coach, like, listen to your body, because your body is going to be able to tell you if we're paying attention and if we're taking our time, like when it's had enough. But also, like, in the busy, crazy lives that we lead, the times we stop to eat, for a lot of us, it's the only time in the day we bother to stop and do anything for our body at all. And yet we're rushing through that as well, right? So I like you said, like I said, it's obviously not going to be something we can do at every single meal, but it does help. And it can be a really eye-opening practice to try some of these tactics and just come to realize, like, we just don't need that much food,
Yeah. And, a few things. Hunger is never an emergency, right? So if you're feeling hungry, you can always get more food later, right? It's You're not going to, there's no, thankfully, food short. Like, you're not going to run out of food. You can always get more. And it is it's human nature, right? The uncertainty. Like, you feel like you need to, eat to a certain point. But allow yourself to feel a little hungry. Allow yourself to feel satisfied. And, on the scale of 1 to 10 in terms of discomfort, we all have, like, this. Let's say running an ultra marathon is a 10. Practice, eating a little less. Practice serving yourself a little less. Practice putting your utensils down between bites, or taking sips of water between bites, or setting a timer with your meal. And I think on the scale of 1 to 10, that's not all that uncomfortable. And if you do it enough times, eventually you realize, wow, I don't need nearly as much food. And, one other thought is, like, we started this with, like, it is uncomfortable to feel satisfied. Food does a lot for us. It, suppresses feelings. It does all sorts of things. It's something that's worth saying to yourself. And I truly believe it is, like, you're more than capable to handle your feelings, right? You truly are more than capable to handle your feelings. And whatever you're feeling, you can deal with it, and talk with your coach about it. Talk with us. Like, we can deal with it together, and it's just feelings. Because I think sometimes that's why we're eating, is we don't want to deal with those feelings.
Yep. 100%. Yeah. And the thing is there's only so long you can run from them anyway. They're going to come up. They're going to come up. And I think, something like this, just practicing a little bit at a time, like not squashing them down, not running from them, just a little bit. I always say, let the steam off the pot just a little bit. And it's a good way to ease into feeling those things.
Yeah. Anything else on your mind before we wrap it up?
I don't think so. I think let's just keep it short and sweet. I think we gave them some good food for thought. And Leave us a message down below if you have any ideas or thoughts or comments about what we've shared, or shoot Adam an email, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.